My name is Melissa Greene. I'm 32, and I never thought coming home early from a tech summit would unravel everything I thought I knew about family. It had been 3 whirlwind days at the Global AI Futures Conference in San Francisco, presenting my latest work on predictive learning models, networking with fellow engineers, soaking in keynotes from industry giants. Exhausting, but exhilarating. All I wanted afterward was a hot shower, a quiet evening, and the comfort of my own bed in Portland. I landed a day earlier than planned after catching a standby seat on a morning flight. My roommate from grad school had a last-minute emergency, and since our closing panel was canceled, I figured, why not surprise my family with some locally brewed coffee and those sourdough cookies my mom loved? But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when the rideshare dropped me off. My quiet residential street was packed with parked cars, SUVs, minivans, even a camper trailer. For a moment, I wondered if someone nearby was hosting a neighborhood event. But as I walked closer, recognition struck like a punch. That was Uncle Peter's Jeep, and my cousin Elaine's Subaru, the one with the faded baby on board decal still stuck on the back window. I paused at the edge of the driveway, squinting up at my own house. Every light was on. Music thudded behind the walls. Through the front window, I caught a blur of movement. Children darting through the living room, people laughing, someone waving a glass of wine. And then I saw it. A giant banner stretched across the wall inside. Greene family is forever. I stood there, stunned. My heart thumped in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. I fumbled with my keys, wheeled my suitcase up the steps, and opened the door. The sound was deafening. Overlapping conversations, music, clinking glasses, a toddler shrieking with glee. The air smelled like pot roast, perfume, and too many people crammed into too small a space. Shoes littered the foyer, coats hung over the banister. A man I vaguely recognized from a family barbecue 6 years ago waved at me like I was a waitress. "Hey, do you have any more forks?" he asked. I blinked. What is this? My cousin Brenda spotted me from the dining room. Her eyes widened. Melissa? Oh, wow. You're here early. I set my suitcase down and scanned the scene. There had to be over 90 people in my house. Some I hadn't seen since my dad's funeral. Others I barely remembered from childhood reunions. And none of them had told me they were coming. Through the crowd, I caught sight of Derek, my older brother, balancing a plate of food and talking animatedly to a group near the kitchen. His wife Carly stood beside him, laughing with my mother, who held a sparkling glass of punch and looked completely at home. The three of them had clearly orchestrated this, and I hadn't received so much as a courtesy text. I took a breath, trying to calm the rising heat in my chest. Not here. Not yet. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a surprise party gone wrong. This was something else. And it was only the beginning. If you've ever returned home to find yourself a stranger in your own space, or felt invisible in the place you should be seen the most, then stay with me. This story might sound outrageous, but it's real. And what happened next? It changed everything. If you're watching this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment below if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family. You're not alone. To really understand how surreal it was to see nearly 100 relatives partying in my house without my knowledge, you'd have to understand the long, winding road that led me there. Growing up, my family didn't exactly wear their favoritism like a badge of honor, but it wasn't subtle either. Derek, my older brother by 3 years, was the golden boy from day one. He could do no wrong, even when he failed algebra, even when he wrecked Dad's old Ford in high school. "He's just trying to find his way," Mom would say with a patient smile. When I aced AP Calculus and got a perfect score on my SATs, she barely looked up from her magazine. "That's just Melissa," she'd mutter, always with her head in a book. To her, being brilliant wasn't something to be proud of. It was something inconvenient, something antisocial. Derek, on the other hand, was charming, outgoing. "People like him," Mom always said, as if that excused everything else. He dropped out of college after a semester, got his real estate license, and started selling suburban homes before he was 24. Within 2 years, he was making six figures flipping fixer-uppers with help from Carly's family. My mom told everyone he was a self-made man. Meanwhile, I spent 6 years earning my degree in computer science and applied machine learning. I joined a research lab in Seattle straight out of grad school. While Derek was popping champagne over selling a house to a retired couple, I was building neural networks that helped hospitals identify cancer cells in CT scans. But at every family gathering, I was still the quiet one. I remember one Christmas, early in my career. I just co-authored a paper that got published in a major journal. It was a huge deal in my field. At dinner, I mentioned it. Once. My uncle nodded politely and passed the mashed potatoes. 5 minutes later, Derek stood up to announce he was being featured on a local home renovation segment for TV, and the entire room erupted into applause. My mom teared up. "That's my boy," she said proudly. I looked down at my plate and smiled tightly. I was used to it by then. Lap. When Dad passed away suddenly from a stroke 6 years ago, everything shifted. He was the only one in the family who truly saw me. Quietly, without fanfare, he supported my dreams. He read every paper I published and sent me thoughtful emails afterward. When I got into MIT, he took me out for sushi, just the two of us, and told me, "Don't let anyone tell you your brain isn't a gift. Use it like it matters." After the funeral, Mom didn't want to live alone. Derek proposed an idea: buy a duplex-style home and live together as a family. He and Carly would take the downstairs, Mom would have the attached studio unit, and I could have the upstairs suite. At first I hesitated. Mixing finances with family was risky. But I miss my dad. I wanted to believe we could be closer, better. So I used the bonus from a grant project to fund most of the down payment on my half of the house. Derek's share came mostly from Carly's parents. We had a formal co-ownership agreement drafted by my lawyer, Lisa Hammond, which clearly outlined private spaces, shared maintenance, and use of common areas. Derek rolled his eyes during the signing. "We're family," he said. "You really need all this paperwork?" Yes. Yes, I did. The arrangement worked, mostly. I traveled a lot for work, sometimes gone for days or weeks at a time. Derek and Carly hosted the occasional backyard dinner, neighborhood barbecues. I was invited, technically, but almost always when I had a speaking engagement or a grant review meeting. It was almost like they were making sure I wouldn't be there. Mom, for her part, wandered into my apartment whenever she wanted. She'd move things around, rearrange my bookshelves, tidy my kitchen drawers, because it's a mess up here. When I asked for a heads up next time, she patted my cheek and said, "You'll understand when you have kids." So I adapted. I tried to be present at Sunday dinners. I remembered birthdays. I bought thoughtful gifts. I nodded and smiled through stories about Derek's new listings or how Carly found the perfect rug for the dining room. Last Thanksgiving, I received a National Innovation Award for my work in AI healthcare diagnostics. It was the biggest professional moment of my life. At dinner, it wasn't mentioned, but everyone toasted when Derek announced he'd made the local top 10 realtors list. That night, I sat in my room, staring at my award plaque and wondering, if I disappeared, would they even notice? But now, standing in my living room, watching a sea of smiling relatives laugh under a banner that read, "Greene family is forever," I had my answer. They had noticed, just enough to make sure I stayed out of their picture, and I was done pretending not to see it. "Melissa!" my mother exclaimed, finally spotting me from across the dining room. She said it with a forced smile, as if surprised I existed. Her glass clinked lightly against her bracelet. As she pushed through a crowd of chatting, "What are you doing home today? I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow evening." She leaned in for a hug, perfumed and poised, but her body was stiff, robotic, like she wasn't sure whether to greet me or stage manage me. "I caught an earlier flight," I replied evenly, stepping back. The summit ended a day early. Figured I'd... Her eyes flicked over my shoulder, scanning for Derek. I followed her glance and saw him emerging from the kitchen with a tray of drinks, Carly behind him arranging cupcakes on a tiered stand like some Pinterest influencer. When Derek locked eyes with me, his smile faltered. just enough for me to know. "Melissa, hey," he said, voice too bright. "Surprise, we're having a little family thing." I raised an eyebrow. "A little family thing? There are close to 100 people in here." Carly, never one to miss a chance to insert herself, appeared at his side. 99, actually, she said with a proud grin. "It's the first full Greene-Watson family reunion since, well, ever." Watson was Mom's maiden name. The invitation list, apparently, had extended to both sides. I stood there, surrounded by smiling relatives and sticky-fingered kids darting underfoot, wondering why I was the last to know. "How long has this been planned?" I asked quietly, eyes bouncing between the three of them. Derek scratched the back of his neck. "Couple of months. Aunt Valerie suggested it at Christmas. We just ran with it." Christmas. That was 6 months ago. I hadn't been invited to Christmas dinner. The excuse? Too many people? Not enough space. Mom gave a nervous chuckle. "We thought you were going to be at your tech thing, honey. You're always so busy. We didn't want to burden you." "Right," I said, because a text message would have been too much. From the corner of the living room, Great Aunt Lorraine wandered over with a glass of sangria and a crooked smile. "Is that Melissa?" My, Derek's sister. I remember when you used to wear braces and talk about building robots." I forced a smile. "Nice to see you again." "You have such a lovely home," she added. "Derek's done such a great job showing us around. He's just so generous." "Has he now?" I said, my voice turning colder than I intended. Derek flinched, but Carly spoke first. "He gave everyone the grand tour earlier, even showed them the upstairs." I snapped my gaze to her. "The upstairs is my apartment." "Well, technically," Carly started, but I cut her off. "No, not technically. It's my private residence. That's exactly what the co-ownership agreement says." Mom stepped in quickly, smoothing the air. "Now, Melissa, don't be dramatic. We needed space. Your cousin's kids can't do stairs, and we had to put the elders somewhere. By using my bed, my bathroom, moving my things around like I don't live here." I could feel my pulse climbing, my throat tight with a pressure I hadn't felt since college, when I had to fight to be heard in male-dominated labs and rooms full of dismissive glances. "It's not that big of a deal," Derek muttered. "No? Because I think letting nearly 100 people into my home without my consent is a big deal." A hush had started to ripple across the nearby crowd. A few relatives turned toward us, awkwardly sipping their drinks and pretending not to eavesdrop. Then Carly dropped the real bomb. "Since you're barely ever here anyway," she said sweetly, "we were thinking maybe it's time we talk about you selling your share. We could really use the extra space now that we're thinking about starting a family." For a second, all the sound in the room vanished. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping like a slow drum in my ears. There it was, the reason behind the party, the reason behind the secrecy, the reason behind the guest list that didn't include me. They didn't just want me out of the celebration. They wanted me out of the house. I stepped back, blinking. I should have yelled, I should have cried, but I didn't. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked toward the stairs. I needed to see the damage with my own eyes. I needed confirmation of what I already felt in my gut. This wasn't my home anymore. Not because I left, but because they quietly, deliberately erased me from it. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing under my shoes like a warning bell in my ears. My apartment, my sanctuary, was just 20 steps away, but I had never felt so distant from it. The door was unlocked. My hand hesitated at the knob. Part of me wanted to believe I'd find everything untouched, that this was all a misunderstanding, a series of thoughtless but harmless decisions. But the truth was already unraveling around me. When I pushed the door open, I was hit with a wall of unfamiliar smells. Perfume, cologne, potpourri someone had left on the kitchen counter. The faint scent of my lemon lavender candles was long gone. Air mattresses crowded my office floor. Suitcases I didn't recognize sat slumped near my bookshelves like squatters in a library. Someone had moved my ergonomic chair into the corner and laid out coloring books and crayons across my desk. Crayon marks streaked the surface, bright, unapologetic lines in red and green. My bedroom was worse. My carefully made bed, with its navy linen sheets, was rumpled. The pillowcases had been changed to floral ones I didn't own. A stranger's pajamas were draped over the arm of my reading chair. My lamp had been unplugged and replaced by a nightlight shaped like a dolphin. I opened my closet and found it half filled with unfamiliar coats, bags, even a pair of orthopedic shoes. My dresser drawers were partially open, their contents rearranged. I felt something tighten in my chest. Rage or heartbreak, I couldn't tell. Then I walked into the bathroom. A child I didn't recognize stood in the middle of the room, wide-eyed, clutching the remains of one of my perfume bottles, shattered glass scattered at his feet. "I was just looking," he whispered. I didn't yell. I didn't scold. I just nodded once and said, "It's okay. Just go find your parents." He stepped carefully around the glass, then scurried out the door, leaving behind the jagged remnants of a bottle that had belonged to my grandmother. I stood there, staring at it. The scent still hung in the air, sweet, powdery, nostalgic. Now gone. I leaned against the bathroom sink, gripping its edges to keep myself upright. My head buzzed, heart pounding in my ears. It wasn't just the mess or the disrespect. It was the message, loud and clear, that I didn't matter, that my space wasn't mine, that everything I had built, protected, and curated could be casually overwritten by other people's comfort. I took a breath, then another, and then I did something I didn't expect. I pulled out my phone. I began documenting everything, photo after photo, the coloring marks on my desk, the suitcases in my hallway, the rearranged dresser, the broken perfume bottles. I took wide shots and close-ups, time-stamped everything. I opened my notes app and started logging the damages. The boundaries crossed, the personal items moved, the sheer number of people who had accessed my space without permission. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry in the middle of a party full of people who thought they were entitled to my life. I was going to build a case, systematically. I moved into my living room and started packing a small weekend bag. Just the essentials: laptop chargers, a few changes of clothes, my tablet, a folder with my co-ownership agreement, and the hard drive with my AI research backups. Just as I zipped the bag shut, there was a knock on the door. It opened without waiting for a response. "Aunt Grace?" I blinked. My father's older sister stepped in quietly, eyes scanning the room. She had always been a woman of quiet strength, sharp-witted, kind-eyed. At 76, she still stood tall and proud, even now, in the chaos of my invaded space. "I thought I might find you up here," she said gently. "Mind if I sit?" I nodded numbly and watched her settle onto the edge of my bed, careful not to disturb the unfamiliar bedding. "I want you to know I had no idea you weren't told about the reunion," she began. "When I asked Derek about it weeks ago, he said you were too busy to help but had given your blessing." My jaw clenched. "This is the first I've heard of it." She nodded, eyes sympathetic. "Your father would be furious. You were always his compass for fairness." The mention of Dad made my throat tighten. "They've been sleeping in my bed, Aunt Grace, using my office as a daycare. Derek just asked me to sell my half of the house." Her eyebrows shot up. "Did he now?" I nodded. "He's drowning in debt. I found paperwork in the closet, credit cards, failed refinance attempts. This whole reunion, it's more than a family gathering. It's a campaign to push me out." Grace sat back slowly. "Then don't react emotionally. That's what they're counting on." I zipped my bag and stood. "I'm not going to yell. I'm going to outthink them." She smiled softly. "Good girl. Your father would be proud." And for the first time that day, I believed her. By the time Aunt Grace closed the door behind her, I had shifted into a different mindset. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about control. My control. Downstairs, laughter and music rose again. Someone had started a karaoke session, and the off-key rendition of Sweet Caroline vibrated through the floorboards. It felt like a mockery. My family was celebrating under my roof, in my rooms, on my furniture, as if I didn't exist. But I did exist, and I was done being invisible. I sent a single text to Madison, my closest friend since college. "Family emergency. Can I call you?" She replied instantly. Of course. Come over. Daniel's making lasagna, and the guest room's all yours. But I had already booked a hotel. I needed time, space, quiet, not comfort. Not yet. I left my room, my bag slung over one shoulder, my laptop tucked under my arm. No one noticed me on the stairs, or rather, they noticed, but they looked away. Eye contact was fleeting, smiles evaporated. The air grew heavier the closer I got to the front door. In the kitchen, I passed Carly, who was now giving instructions about dinner service like a wedding planner on a caffeine binge. "Melissa, there you are," she chirped. "Could you grab a few more folding chairs from the garage?" "No," I said calmly, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. "I've got some urgent work emails to take care of. I'll be stepping out for a bit." "Oh, okay, sure, don't worry, we've got it all under control." Her tone dripped with relief. As I reached the door, I heard my cousin Jared ask Derek about real estate trends in the area. His response made me pause, hand on the doorknob. "Great investment zone. Once the paperwork clears, we'll have the whole house and can renovate the upstairs into something really beautiful." Paperwork? Renovate? He said it like I was already gone. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. At the hotel, the lobby was quiet. Polished floors, soft lighting, no screaming kids. The front desk clerk asked if I was in town for business or pleasure. "Neither," I replied, "just creating some distance." When I got to my room, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I unpacked my laptop, plugged it in, and began sorting the photos I had taken. One folder for the living room, one for the office, one for the bathroom. I labeled everything with timestamps and notes. Item moved, glass broken, closet opened. Then I opened my co-ownership agreement and reread it line by line. Clause 4. Each co-owner shall retain exclusive rights to their designated private spaces. Clause 7. Events involving more than 20 guests require written mutual consent. Clause 9. Unauthorized use of private living quarters constitutes breach of agreement. They hadn't just disrespected me, they had violated a legally binding contract. I drafted a preliminary list of next steps. Call attorney Lisa Hammond. Arrange formal assessment of property damages. Document all family communication. Cease verbal interaction. Move to written contact only. Contact a property management firm for consultation. At midnight, I finally allowed myself a glass of wine from the minibar. As I sipped it slowly, I scrolled through the missed texts on my phone. "Kevin, where did you go? Mom's asking about you." "Mom, this is childish, Melissa. Come back downstairs." "Carly, please don't make a scene. It's just family." And then this. From Derek. "Maybe if you were around more, you'd understand what it means to be part of this family." I didn't reply. I simply archived the message and added it to a folder titled Evidence, Emotional Manipulation. The next morning, I called Lisa. She'd been my attorney since grad school and helped draft the original house contract. "Melissa," she answered warmly. "It's early. Everything okay?" "Not really," I said. "I think I need to initiate legal steps. They've crossed every line we laid out." As I filled her in on the party, the invasion, the damaged items, and Derek's comment about buying me out, her tone shifted from curious to sharp and focused. "Send me everything," she said. "Photos, documents, dates, and any messages. This isn't just disrespectful. This could constitute a breach with financial implications." We scheduled a meeting for 11 the next day. After the call, I took a long breath and looked out the window. The city skyline glimmered under morning sun, cool and distant. Then a new email popped up. Subject: Opportunity. IMRC Geneva appointment. I opened it. Heart pounding. "Dear Melissa, Dr. Heinze from the International Medical Research Consortium has forwarded your name as a leading candidate for a 3-year appointment in Geneva. We were deeply impressed with your presentation at the San Francisco Summit and would like to speak with you about the position this week." My fingers trembled as I read it again. Geneva, 3 years, fully funded. Fully. Full housing and relocation included. This wasn't an escape. It was an invitation to choose myself, fully, finally. I arrived at Lisa Hammond's law office at precisely 11 o'clock a.m. a sleek folder tucked under one arm, and a flash drive in my pocket. I wore dark jeans, a blazer, and the kind of calm expression that only comes from a night of sorting rage into carefully labeled files. Lisa greeted me at the door with her usual blend of warmth and razor focus. She'd been my attorney since grad school. She knew how to read me in a single glance. "Let me guess," she said, gesturing toward the folder. "This is your quiet version of flipping a table." "Exactly," I said with a tight smile. She led me into the conference room, where another woman in a gray suit was already seated. "Melissa, this is Janine Morales, a property law specialist. I asked her to sit in." "Pleasure," I said, shaking her hand. "I have a lot." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing everything. I opened my laptop and showed them the time-stamped photos. Lisa read through our original co-ownership agreement again, nodding slowly as she highlighted clauses with surgical precision. Janine took notes like a stenographer at a murder trial. "So let me summarize," Lisa said at last, leaning back. "Your co-owner, your brother and his wife, coordinated an event of nearly 100 people inside a shared property without notifying or gaining consent from you, the legal co-owner. They allowed unauthorized entry into your private residence, resulting in the displacement of personal property, possible damage to valuables, and emotional distress." I nodded. "They also misled extended family into believing you were informed and in agreement," I added, "and they've now expressed interest in pressuring me to sell my share." "Which lines up perfectly with the financial documents you found," Janine added. "This wasn't just inconsiderate, it was calculated." Lisa tapped a pen against her notebook. "You have several options here. The most immediate would be a partition by sale, forcing the liquidation of the property and equitable division of proceeds. But that's nuclear, messy, emotional, expensive." I exhaled. "Is there a cleaner option?" Lisa smiled. "Yes, you propose a buyout. Either Derek buys your share at full market value plus damages for breach, or you retain your share and place your apartment under professional management, effectively renting it out." "I already reached out to a management company last night," I admitted. "Tentative consultation for tomorrow." Lisa raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Smart. That would create a buffer between you and your family. No more emotional leverage, just business." "What about my mom?" I asked. "She's in the in-law unit. I don't want to throw her out, despite everything." Janine flipped to a page in the agreement. "Her right to occupy the studio is contingent on both co-owners' approval. However, if you choose the management route, we can draft a rider to secure her housing rights during your absence, while clearly defining boundaries, like no unauthorized access upstairs." I nodded slowly, my mind already building the pieces into a plan. Lisa leaned forward. "And just so you know, you have the upper hand here. You documented everything. You stayed calm. You didn't escalate emotionally, which means you're the reasonable party. Courts and management companies love reason." I almost laughed. Staying quiet felt like losing, at first. "Sometimes silence," she said, "is the sound of strategy forming." By the time I left the office, I had a clear roadmap. Step 1. Finish documenting all damage after the reunion ended. Step 2. Have the property professionally assessed. Step 3. Serve Derek with formal notification of his violations, along with 2 options: buyout or coexist under new terms. Step 4. Communicate only through writing from this point forward. No more hallway arguments. No more veiled guilt trips. No more, "you're never around anyway," as a cover for trespassing. Just boundaries, legally backed. That afternoon, I drove straight to my bank and accessed my safe deposit box. Inside were old journals, backup drives, my grandmother's will, and a small box of jewelry my father had given me over the years. I took only what I needed, the essentials, the things no one else had the right to touch. From there, I visited a financial advisor, someone Lisa had recommended, to make sure all my accounts were locked down and separate from any joint obligations tied to the house. We reviewed everything: 401k, investments, even my freelance consulting income. I set up 2-step verification on all platforms and made sure nothing could be linked or drained through shared ownership. When I finally returned to the house late Sunday night, the party was over. The cars were gone. The banner had been taken down. But the mess remained. Crumbled napkins, empty wine bottles, half-deflated balloons, and a sticky film on the hardwood that made every step feel like an echo of what I'd missed. I stood at the base of the stairs, bag slung across my shoulder, and whispered to myself, they underestimated the wrong sister. The next morning, I met with Jennifer Collins, director of a boutique property management firm specializing in high-end shared ownership cases. Her office was efficient, tasteful, and, most importantly, emotionally neutral. I co-own a property, I explained, but I'll be relocating internationally soon. I want to retain my ownership, but have my portion professionally managed and rented during my absence. Jennifer nodded, instantly professional. We've handled similar situations. The key is clarity, establishing boundaries between owners and setting tenant expectations. Our role would be to insulate you from conflict. Exactly what I needed. She outlined their services: tenant screening, maintenance coordination, financial statements, legal compliance. They would even serve as intermediaries for disputes with the other co-owner. The idea of never having to speak to Derek or Carly again about repairs or rent splits made my shoulders drop an inch with relief. We'll need to inspect your portion of the home, she added, and document current conditions for our records. I scheduled the inspection for Tuesday morning, when I knew Derek would be at work. That afternoon, I met again with Lisa, who had prepared the formal packet. It included a breach of agreement notice citing the party and unauthorized use of private space, a proposal with two clear options. 1. Derek could buy out my share at full market value plus calculated damages. 2. I would retain ownership and legally rent my apartment through professional management, with new rules enforced by contract. We also included a separate agreement clarifying Mom's living situation. She could remain in the in-law studio indefinitely, but only under new, non-negotiable boundaries. No entry into my space, no participation in property decisions, no interference with tenants. Send all of this by certified mail, Lisa instructed. And from now on, no more text threads, no more calls. Document everything. I agreed. Tuesday morning came. Jennifer and her assistant arrived promptly for the inspection. They moved efficiently through my apartment, documenting every inch. She frowned at the crayon marks on my desk, photographed the scuff on my bookshelf, and noted the lingering residue on the bathroom tile from the broken perfume bottles. Then the front door opened. Derek. He walked in holding a smoothie, clearly caught off guard. His eyes landed on Jennifer's clipboard and narrowed. "What's going on?" he asked, stepping into my apartment without knocking. Jennifer didn't flinch. "I'm Jennifer Collins from Elite Property Management. Dr. Greene has engaged our services to manage this space." Derek's expression twisted. "Manage? You're renting it out?" "She is," Jennifer said before I could answer. "The co-ownership agreement allows her to rent her portion as long as it's professionally handled. We're here to ensure that's done legally and respectfully." He turned to me. "Seriously, Melissa? You're renting it out to strangers? You didn't even talk to us about this." "No," I said calmly, "because talking has never been your strong suit when it comes to transparency." His jaw flexed. "This is still my house, too." "No, Derek. It's our house, and I'm doing what I have every legal right to do." He stormed out, muttering something about calling his lawyer. 30 minutes later, Mom showed up. Somehow, she'd gotten in again, probably using the emergency key she wasn't supposed to have anymore. "This has gone far enough," she announced, marching into my office as I packed up my remaining research books. "You're tearing this family apart over nothing." I turned to face her, steady. "I'm exercising my legal rights over property I co-own. You're bringing strangers into our home. You're threatening the roof over my head." "No," I said. "I've explicitly protected your right to stay. But you no longer get to rearrange my life without consequence." "Boundaries?" she scoffed. "Families don't need contracts and rules." I met her gaze directly. Then maybe this family should have respected mine before I had to draw them in ink. Her face flushed, but for once, she didn't argue. That night, I finalized my video interview with the research team in Geneva. Dr. Mueller, the program director, confirmed their interest and gave me 1 week to decide. The opportunity felt like the perfect bookend to everything that had happened. Not an escape, a graduation. A reward for surviving. Wednesday morning, I sent the certified packets. Thursday, I received a terse email from Derek's lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss alternative resolutions. Progress. They weren't ignoring me anymore. Now they had to negotiate with me. 2 days later, I walked into Lisa's downtown office with my head held high, a leather folder under my arm, and a new sense of stillness in my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. Derek was already there, seated stiffly next to his lawyer, a man in his mid-40s with an expensive tie and tired eyes. They were both sipping from identical paper cups of coffee. When I entered, Derek stood halfway, hesitated, then sat again without a word. Lisa greeted me, cool and professional, then nodded toward the glass-walled conference room. "Let's keep it brief," she said quietly, "but make it clear." Inside, the table was laid out like a battlefield. 2 sets of folders, 2 sets of attorneys, and a long polished surface where lines had already been drawn. Derek's lawyer spoke first. "We understand Melissa is considering a rental arrangement. Derek and his wife feel this would create long-term instability for the property. They would prefer to buy her out to preserve the home environment." Lisa smiled politely. "And yet, Melissa has every legal right to rent her share, especially since the agreement includes a property management clause. It's already in motion." Derek cut in, his voice tight. "It's not just about paperwork, Melissa. It's about trust, about keeping things in the family." I turned to him. "Trust? You planned a 100-person reunion in my home without even texting me. You let strangers sleep in my bed. You moved my things, and then you tried to pressure me into selling. So forgive me if your appeal to family rings hollow." He looked away. Lisa slid a sheet forward. "We're willing to suspend the rental launch under 2 conditions. Full market value for Melissa's share, plus an additional amount to account for property damage, breach of privacy, and loss of use. Total valuation, $412,000. Derek's lawyer scoffed. "That's steep." "It's generous," Lisa replied coolly. "Considering the alternative is a continued co-ownership with a fully managed long-term tenant and a legally binding agreement Derek will have no say in." Derek's face was pale. "I don't have that kind of cash." "Then we proceed with the rental," Lisa said, closing the folder. There was a long pause, and then Derek finally said it. "I'll find the money." His lawyer blinked. "Are you sure?" Derek nodded. "We've been talking to Carly's parents. They'll help us secure a new loan." I didn't say anything. I just watched him quietly. Watched the realization set in that I wasn't bluffing, wasn't bending, wasn't his little sister anymore. By the next morning, Lisa emailed me a signed letter of intent. Derek would buy out my share, in full, within 60 days. I stared at the document for a long time, unsure whether I felt relief or grief, maybe both. Lisa had added a postscript. "Entirely your decision, Melissa. The rental path is still viable, but this gives you a clean break if that's what you want." I closed the email and went for a long walk through downtown Portland. Trees rustled gently overhead. The air was crisp with early autumn. I wandered without direction, letting the quiet settle. That evening, I had dinner with Lucia, a neurologist visiting from Germany, whom I'd met at the San Francisco summit. She asked how I was doing. "I might be selling the house," I said. "And what would that mean to you?" she asked. "It means freedom, but it also feels like walking away, like giving up." Lucia sipped her wine and smiled. "Or it means letting go of a story that was never written for you in the first place." I decided to accept the buyout, but on my terms. Lisa drafted the final papers, and I added 2 personal stipulations. A portion of the sale proceeds would fund a scholarship for underrepresented women in STEM, in Dad's name. Mom's right to stay in the in-law unit would be secured, but with legal boundaries. No keys, no upstairs access, no involvement in property decisions. Within 3 weeks, the funds transferred. My accounts updated. My name came off the deed. For the first time in years, I felt unanchored. And that was exactly what I needed. Before leaving Portland, I spent one final afternoon in the now empty apartment. I stood in the middle of the living room, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to the walls, but to the version of me that had grown here, survived here, and finally stood up for herself. Then I closed the door behind me. For good. The first thing I noticed when I arrived in Geneva wasn't the beauty. It was the silence. Not emptiness, but the kind of silence that holds space for thought, for breath, for healing. The apartment the Research Institute provided overlooked Lake Geneva, with floor-to-ceiling windows and polished hardwood floors that gleamed in the morning sun. The space was modern, efficient, and, most importantly, mine. No one had rearranged my books. No one had opened my drawers. No one had slept in my bed. I stood in the middle of the living room, my suitcase still zipped, and let the weight of the last few months slide off my shoulders like a coat I never realized had gotten so heavy. The International Medical Research Consortium was everything I had dreamed of. World-class labs, dedicated researchers from across the globe. A team that greeted me not as an outsider, not as a tag-along, but as a contributor, a peer. Dr. Muller, my supervisor, introduced me as the woman whose predictive modeling work in San Francisco turned every head in the room. I smiled politely, but inside something deeper cracked open: validation. For the first time, my work wasn't invisible. People listened, asked questions, took notes. When I presented early findings on AI-assisted diagnostics during our first team roundtable, Dr. Amani from Nairobi leaned forward with genuine interest. "Your model doesn't just analyze," she said. "It learns from false negatives. That's rare." I almost laughed. Back home, my family couldn't even be bothered to ask me what I worked on. But Geneva didn't erase my past. It made room for it. 6 weeks into my new role, I received an email from Derek. "I'm writing this from Dad's old study. The place feels weird without you upstairs. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say, I get it now. Maybe not fully, but more than I did." He didn't apologize. Not directly. But there was something vulnerable about his words that made me stop. He continued, "Carly and I are expecting. Found out last week." And it made me think, what kind of family do I want to create? What kind of brother have I been? That email didn't undo the damage, but it was something, a crack in the wall. I waited a full day before replying. "Congratulations, that's huge news. I hope everything goes smoothly for you and Carly. As for me, the work is intense but deeply fulfilling. Our early data shows a 78% accuracy rate in identifying high-risk cases, and the team is moving toward clinical trials. I'm not ready to say things are okay between us, but I do appreciate your message. It was firm, honest, and kind, in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be in a long time." In the weeks that followed, the tone of communication shifted. No more guilt trips, no more manipulation. Mom started adding a short note to Derek's emails. "I saw your research on the news. They said it could save thousands. Your dad would be proud." Short, awkward, but heartfelt. One day, she wrote simply, "You were right about the locks. Boundaries help. I'm starting to see that now." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure how. Some days, I missed my father so sharply it felt like breathlessness. But then I'd walk along the lake, or sit in the lab during a breakthrough moment, and feel him there. Not in place, but in presence. 3 months in, Madison came to visit. We sipped coffee in my little kitchen while watching sailboats glide by on the water. "You're different," she said, watching me. "Lighter." "Lighter?" She smiled. "Like you finally set something down." I nodded slowly. I stopped trying to be accepted by people who were never willing to see me fully. I still had moments when I'd check my phone and feel that sting of a message left unanswered for years. Moments when I thought about holidays, about how different things could have been. But those moments didn't control me anymore. The past wasn't a place I lived in now. It was a place I walked away from, with documents signed, dignity intact, and a new beginning ahead. Nearly a year after I'd boarded that flight to Switzerland, with a bag full of documents and a heart full of distance, I found myself landing back on U.S. soil. The reason? A medical research conference in Boston. My team had just been greenlit for the next phase of trials, and I was scheduled to present preliminary outcomes. The irony wasn't lost on me. The last time I left Boston, I'd been running. This time I was returning, with intention. I'd planned to keep the trip short, speak, network, leave. But then I received an email from Derek. If you're in town for the conference, maybe dinner? Carly would love for you to meet Emily. Mom's been asking too. Just one meal. No expectations. I stared at the message for a long time. 1 year ago, this would have been bait, emotional leverage. But now it felt like something different. Not warmth, not quite apology, but openness. I replied, "Dinner works Thursday night. I'll bring dessert." The restaurant was small, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Neutral ground. Carly was already seated, bouncing a baby girl on her lap. Emily. Tiny. Curious. Wide blue eyes that reminded me of Dad. "Melissa," Carly said, standing up awkwardly, unsure whether to hug me or not. I extended a hand. She took it. The gesture said, "I'm here. That's enough." Derek approached next, nervous, palms rubbing together. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice soft. "She's been fussy all day, but I think she was waiting for you." Emily stared at me, then giggled, and just like that, something softened. 10 minutes later, Mom walked in. She looked older, not just from time, but from reality. Her hair was grayer, her posture slightly curved inward, but her eyes, when they landed on mine, were not guarded. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. She simply said, "You look strong." I smiled gently. Switzerland agrees with me. Dinner was quiet, polite, a little awkward. There were pauses too long, jokes that didn't quite land, and silence that felt heavy with unsaid history. But there were also moments of effort. Carly asking about the next phase of trials. Derek sharing that he was back in night school, studying sustainable development. Mom watching me closely but not interrupting once. Then, over coffee, Mom said it. "I read your paper in the Lancet. I didn't understand half of it, but I printed it out. It's on my fridge." I blinked, not from emotion, but surprise. Derek smiled. "She makes everyone read it before they can come over." We laughed, a real one this time. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider sitting at the family table. I felt like someone who had chosen to sit there, not out of guilt or obligation, but because I'd rebuilt myself enough to know I could leave again and still be whole. As we got up to leave, Derek handed me Emily. I hesitated for just a second. She was light, warm, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, just like mine used to wrap around Dad's. "She has Dad's eyes," I said softly. Mom nodded, her own eyes glistening, and his quiet. We stood in that silence for a moment, not avoiding it, but honoring it. As I handed Emily back, Mom touched my arm. "You don't have to come back," she said. "But if you ever want to, I'll be better at making space." I didn't promise anything, but I said, "I know." Back in my hotel room that night, I texted Lucia. Dinner was unexpected. Not a reunion, not forgiveness, just real. She replied, "Sometimes healing isn't about rebuilding the bridge. It's about walking past the river without needing to cross it again." I smiled. That was exactly it. The next morning, I stood before a packed auditorium and presented our newest research data. A 79.3% accuracy rate in identifying early-stage tumors using AI-enhanced diagnostics. The room erupted in questions, curiosity, and applause. And afterward, as I stood in the hallway, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Dr. Lang from MIT, an old mentor. "You're not the same student I knew 5 years ago," he said with a smirk. "You're something else now." I nodded. I had to unlearn who I thought I needed to be, so I could become who I already was. Family doesn't begin and end with blood. It begins with belonging, and sometimes that belonging starts inside yourself. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. And remember, you deserve to be respected, seen, and valued, no matter what any banner says. Thank you for being here.